It's my privilege to welcome you to today's Together to End Violence Spotlight session as part of the Global Forum for Children and Youth. I'm Howard Taylor, Executive Director of the End Violence Partnership, launched in 2016 by the UN Secretary General as a platform for collective evidence-based advocacy and action. The End Violence Partnership works with a unique coalition of almost 700 organizations to raise awareness, catalyze leadership commitments, mobilize new resources, promote evidence-based solutions, and support everyone working to end all forms of violence against children. In this 90-minute session hosted by the End Violence Partnership, we will have the opportunity to hear powerful testimonies and perspectives from children and from survivors of violence who are dedicating their lives to ending it. Alongside international leaders and experts from government and civil society, together we will celebrate recent breakthroughs and outline what is needed to seize the moment and accelerate progress. The session will also launch a children's manifesto calling for action and urging the international community to respond at the Together to End Violence Leaders event being held in June 2022. I'm confident that we will all be better informed and also inspired to advocate and take action for change so that every child grows up in a safe, secure, and nurturing environment at home, at school, online, and in the community. Violence, exploitation, and abuse of children remains the most pervasive crime of our generation. It takes place in every country, in every community, and across all cultural and socio-economic contexts. It is a silent epidemic, delivering devastating long-term consequences for the 1 billion children directly impacted each year and for their families, communities, and society. COVID-19 has firmly placed a spotlight on the unacceptable scale and impact of violence, and it's exposing children everywhere to an even greater risk of violence, exploitation, and abuse, compelling us to act to build back better and safer for children. Decisive action now is not only an investment to prevent the devastating intergenerational, social, and economic impacts of violence on children and societies. It's also a cost-effective accelerator to address other COVID-19 impacts and help achieve multiple sustainable development goals. Ending violence in childhood is critical to deliver positive, lifelong outcomes and deliver a better return on investments made to improve children's physical and mental health, education outcomes, gender equality, and peaceful and just societies. And there is good news and a cause for hope and optimism. Collectively, we have made huge progress over recent years, building on decades of progress and learning by so many individuals and organizations. The issue of ending violence against children has gained traction as a global issue, with a wide range of stakeholders now prioritizing and investing in evidence-based solutions like never before. So we have an unprecedented opportunity to build on these foundations and scale evidence-based solutions that we know work. Let's get started. I am delighted to be joined by Helle Thorning-Schmidt, Board Co-Chair of the End Violence Partnership and former Prime Minister of Denmark, and by Joan Nyanyuki, the Executive Director of the African Child Policy Forum, and they're both going to help us set the scene. Helle, earlier this year, you became Board Co-Chair of the End Violence Partnership. What motivated you to take on this role, and why now?
A couple of things, Howard, and thanks for having me. First of all, this is something that I've always engaged in. I always thought we should try what we could to end violence against children. I wrote an essay about this when I was like 11 years old, trying to get the Danish government to adopt legislation. And I also think we are in a special situation now because it feels like there is momentum to do something. It is like everyone has finally understood that violence against children impacts children forever. It impacts their health, their education, their well-being in general, and it also impacts their children, so the next generation. So there are so many things that we have now understood that means we can make change. And I'm also seeing some real change happening. We are seeing 63 states that have now prohibited corporal punishment. On a few decades ago, this was only 4. We are seeing China stepping up, home to more than 300 million children, a country that had unveiled new plans for children's development that includes prevention of violence. We are seeing G7 ministers discussing this and made a groundbreaking commitment to tackle child sexual exploitation and abuse online and offline. So many new signs here telling us that this is a moment now we need to seize it to end violence against children.
That's so powerful, Helle. You've just really drawn out that we are living in a moment which we must seize. What do you think we need to really focus on to seize that moment, to create a world in which every child can grow up in a safe, secure, and nurturing environment?
Well, we need to unite. We need to unite the good forces across continents, across sectors. And what we need to unite around is a single shared vision of a world where every child grows up safe and secure. We also need to raise awareness. We need to raise awareness that this is possible. This is not something that we can never do. This is something we can do if we work together. We need to advocate with one voice to set game-changing policies, proposals that are prepared by experts. We know what works, and we need to do it. And we need to share cost-effective methods to do that based on evidence. We know what works. We have to do it. Unfortunately, as so many other things, this is an underfunded area. And you know that, Howard, that this is underfunded and we need to do more. If we look at donor governments, they invest actually less than 1% of their annual funds directed to end violence against children. That's not enough. Only 20% of national action plans to end child violence are fully funded. So countries say they want to do something, but it's not fully funded. And private sector investment is unknown, but certainly far too low. So as you can see, the good intentions are there. The funding are not quite there. But I do believe that if we speak with one voice, we can even bring the funding up. And that is the factor that will really change things around and be part of ending violence against children.
Helle, that is really clear, compelling, and actionable. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Now to Joan, who is joining us from Nairobi. Joan, you have spent decades working to prevent and respond to violence against children across Africa and globally. What is the current global context that we are all operating within, and what trends are you seeing?
Thank you, Howard. The current global context is one where violence against children has become an epidemic, happening across all spaces and all spheres where children live, learn, play, and even online. And we are also operating in a context where enough is not being done to keep children safe. Yet we all have the responsibility to do that as parents, caregivers, leaders, NGOs. We can't deny that COVID-19 has really shaped the context quite heavily in the last 2 years. We've seen children are at greater risk of violence, but also that there has been disruption in terms of the response services. Children have been more isolated, and being out of school, this has driven millions of children into child labor, into child marriage, into child trafficking, and even into online child sexual exploitation and abuse, and in all its forms, from cyberbullying to sexual exploitation, to their data being used and shared in inappropriate ways. So we are concerned by that growing problem. And but I want to say, as I describe that context, that COVID-19 has been a double-edged sword, and there has been it has brought out an opportunity for us to really be able to understand previously hidden forms of violence and new and emerging forms of violence, so that then we can have tailored and appropriate responses. It's important also, when we speak of context, to remember the Global Status Report that was released in 2020, which finds several interesting things. One is that many countries have made progress, but unfortunately, this progress is uneven. Laws are not being adequately implemented, and countries are not collecting data and using data optimally. And this is both about the amount of data collected and the quality of data, and how it is then translated to inform policy planning and financial resource allocation.
Thank you, Joan. There was so much in that response, that there's an epidemic of child violence and abuse around the world, that the COVID-19 pandemic has made things worse, but everybody has a role to play, and data, of course, is critical in informing that response. A part of what we're doing today is also noting and celebrating progress that is being made. And you mentioned just now, the double-edged sword of COVID-19 and the greater awareness of violence against children. So perhaps to get us started, could you share an example of recent progress which you have witnessed at country level? And from that example, what stands out? What were the enabling factors for change?
Yes, I would like to share the progress in Sierra Leone, a country that was ravaged by war for more than a decade, but which has now recently, in the last 2 years, taken very determined steps to address sexual violence against children and against women. And this started in January 2020 when the president himself declared it as a national emergency. And from the example of Sierra Leone, I want to just illustrate a couple of very good signs to good progress. And the first is the involvement of political leadership. When high-level top political leadership gets invested in ending violence against children, then several things happen. One, it gets high up on the national agenda. And then second, we see that national resources are directed to actually prevention and response programs. So that's one good example, and we commend Sierra Leone for that. The second one is on the importance of making sure that what's happening at the top is also cascading down to community level. And that's the element of community participation, community involvement, community ownership, and community drive. Because communities must own and buy the efforts that we are making to address violence against children for the simple reason that children live in communities. So whether it is school communities, religious communities, faith-based, sporting communities, it's important that where programs draw on their strengths, on their mechanisms, on their ability to reach the most hard to reach children, on their understanding of the nuances that make certain children fall through the cracks. It's important that communities participate and are actively engaged, and that then complements the political leadership participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan, for getting us started with that really powerful example from Sierra Leone and the criticality of high-level political leadership, but also the engagement of children and communities themselves. Thank you so much, Joan.
Thank you, Howard.
We will now show a short video featuring a range of leaders to place a spotlight on the 6 Together to End Violence policy proposals. If adopted and implemented, these proposals would accelerate much needed progress to end violence against children everywhere. The video will be followed by our first End Violence champion, Brisa D'Angelo, who will share her inspiring personal story as a survivor of sexual abuse, dedicating her life to ending it in Bolivia and around the world. I believe we have an unprecedented historical opportunity in this generation to end violence against children. And when we succeed, and it will take all of us, we will change the course of human history.
Governments, leaders, political leaders, and all leaders across the world, we need more commitment to help end violence against children.
This is why the Together to End Violence campaign is calling for urgent action to prevent the abuse that affects 1 billion children every year. We are catalyzing the political and financial commitments to do so. And as part of that process, proposing 6 game-changing actions to end violence against children for good. If we can accomplish these goals, we will be closer to a world where every child is safe. At home, at school, online, and in their communities.
We need local action by governments, cities, and local authorities to embed proven violence prevention approaches in their policies, budgets, institutions, and regulatory frameworks.
The more we can make concrete recommendations to parents, to teachers, to community members, the more of a difference we'll see.
We can grip this problem. There are huge resources available that we've only just begun to tap. We have a coalition, we have a network that can achieve our aim of ending this terrible crime.
Children have to be safe, they have to be healthy, and they have to be educated. And if we can achieve those 3 goals, we'll make some progress towards achieving the SDGs.
It is our fundamental duty as leaders to do everything in our power to protect children from the chaos and madness of wars that have nothing to do with them. Together we are beginning to make progress, but we need to continue on that path, and I urge you to make it a priority.
Allocating budgets and strengthening services for the well-being and protection of children from all forms of violence is an investment and will be key to the recovery phase as we build back.
Now is the time to translate what we know into what we do. And by working together, we can make these 6 game-changing calls to action a reality. Will you join us?
My name is Brisa de Angulo, and today I want to leave you with one message, and that is that you are the change that you've been waiting for. I know that I need to tell you a little bit about who I am so that you understand my statement. When I was a teenager, I was filled with life. I was very involved in community service. I was in Bolivia's national swimming team. I played the piano. I played the violin. I gave concerts throughout the city. I was full of life and energy. But in a blink of an eye, all of that reduced to one thought: I wish I could die. My adult cousin, who was also a youth pastor, came to live in our home. And within months of arriving, he started to sexually assaulting me, and he continued to repeatedly rape me for many months. His process of grooming was so skillful, and his process of isolating me that in a couple of days after his arrival, he started spinning a web around me. And little by little, he started invalidating who I was, invalidating what I felt, invalidating everything that I did. I went from being a girl who loved life to someone who just hated everything. I dropped out from school. I quit my swimming team. I stopped making music. I stopped all the activities that created any type of joy. And little by little, my aggressor started isolating me from my parents, from my sisters, from my friends, practically from anyone that could have done anything to help me. In their eyes, my aggressor was the savior trying to help me out of my unjustified and inexplicable depression, but they had no idea what he was doing behind doors. During these 8 months of torture and rape, I developed deep depression, eating disorders. I attempted suicide twice. I somehow believed that 1, death was the only way out of this pain, and 2, that somehow my death was going to be less painful for my family than them finding out that I was being raped in our own home. After my second suicide, that's when my healing journey started, but it wasn't easy at all. Everywhere that I went for help, I was ostracized and blamed. I went from prosecutors who threatened to put me in jail if I continued talking, to forensic doctors who mocked me and laughed at me while I was in the examination table, to judges who discredited my experience. And I couldn't find a lawyer who wanted to take my case. My parents and I had to carry all the burden of the legal journey and the impact of the trauma that we've been through. And after a while, I realized that I had to become my own attorney, that I had to be the change that I wanted to see. I had to be the person who let other children know that I believe them. I had to tell them that what they experienced wasn't their fault. I had to be for them everything that I never found. So at age 17, with the gracious patience and loving support of my parents and siblings, we started the only program in Bolivia for children who suffer sexual violence. Soon after, I took an exam where I graduated, that gave me the diploma to graduate from high school. I went to college, I graduated, became a neuropsychologist to understand how trauma impacted my own life, but also to help other people. And then I became a lawyer to push my case through the legal system, but also to be there for other children who have to face this unfair justice system. Our center quickly became into a powerhouse of amazing women who are also survivors of sexual violence and who dedicate their lives to improving access to justice and healing for children who've been sexually abused. And in the last 17 years, we've accomplished amazing things. For example, when we started, the conviction rate was only 2%. Today, our conviction rate is 95%, which is the highest in the world. We have been able to bring justice and healing to thousands of children and families. But sadly, there is still a lot to do. Worldwide, 1 in every 3 girls is sexually abused and 1 in every 5 boys are suffering sexual violence before the age of 18. But we can change the world. It is possible. We must keep that faith. As a teenager, I got tired of waiting for adults to make a difference, to make a change. And I really hope that you are tired too, because that means that we will use our voices, our lives, our strengths to make a change in this life. When we get tired of waiting, we become the change that we were seeking. And there's no more power than the strength and force of youth. So just to remember, I just want you one message to say that you are the change that you have been waiting for.
I am sure, like me, that you are all moved by Breeza's courage and incredibly powerful story that speaks not only of the devastating impacts and trauma of violence and abuse, but also how large-scale systemic change is often driven by the most powerful advocates of all, survivors of violence. It's now my pleasure to welcome Rachel McLean, the UK Minister for Safeguarding, who will speak about why protecting children from sexual exploitation and abuse is such an important priority, highlighting the recent groundbreaking commitment made by the G7 to tackle it. We will then hear from Jim Fruchterman, founder and CEO of Tech Matters, who will share how technology is helping to shape and strengthen child helplines around the world.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this incredibly important issue today. As Minister for Safeguarding in the UK Home Office, I'm extremely proud to be responsible for leading our government's response to tackling child sexual abuse. And I very much welcome the opportunity to be able to share some reflections with you all today on the UK's journey, to hear others' insights and experiences, and to emphasise how we must draw on the powerful personal testimony of survivors and put it at the core of our approach. Child sexual abuse is a horrific crime that occurs in the communities in which we all live, facilitated by global online networks, transcending borders and creating profound harm and impacts for victims. The UK government is absolutely committed to relentlessly driving forward work to tackle and prevent child sexual abuse at a local, national and particularly relevant to today, an international level. To this end, we published our Tackling Child Sexual Abuse strategy in January of 2021, setting out our ambition and clear action to ensure we are straining every sinew to tackle all forms of CSEA, bringing more offenders to justice, preventing offending in the first place, and safeguarding children and providing better support for victims and survivors. Internationally, we have focused our efforts on working in partnership to tackle online child sexual abuse. This recognises that an instance of harm can straddle multiple countries, with a victim, offender and internet service provider all based in different jurisdictions. Any single government cannot tackle this alone. We are proud to have worked with 5 country partners to develop and launch the voluntary principles to counter online child sexual exploitation and abuse last year. We must continue to call on industry to do all they can to keep children safe online. The Home Secretary was pleased to host G7 Interior Ministers early this year to further expand the global coalition dedicated to concerted international cooperation to achieve these aims. But our efforts must extend beyond engaging tech companies. We need to do more to support law enforcement cooperation, to ensure that frontline professionals across education, social care and health are equipped with the right resources, training and tools to confidently identify and intervene, to provide the best care for victims to help them rebuild their lives, and to promote a wider societal understanding of what child sexual abuse is and how it pervades all of our communities, to help ensure that the child's voice, that survivor's voices, are heard and acted upon. We are proud to be a proactive member of the Council of Europe's Lanzarote Committee to support the work of We Protect Global Alliance and to invest in the Global Fund to End Violence Against Children. In short, to work with those partners who have the reach to drive change at a global level. As a donor of the End Violence Fund, the UK sees the benefit of our investment being embedded in End Violence's wider systemic approach, so that children can be safeguarded whether at home, in school or online. And through End Violence's access to UNICEF's country network, work to promote interventions to keep children safe online are being fully integrated into wider child protection activities and initiatives. And we also recognise the benefit of magnifying the value of our investment if it's matched by other donors, pooling our funding, enable a truly global approach to keeping our children safe around the world. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to continue to step up our efforts to keep children safe online.
Hi, I'm Jim Fruchterman, founder and CEO of Tech Matters, and I'm here today to tell you about the ASAILO project, with the goal of greatly strengthening the child helpline movement with modern technology. The project got going in 2018 when the members of Child Helpline International in over 139 countries came together and decided to co-develop ASAILO with my nonprofit to create a contact center platform designed for counseling and referral helplines. Software development began in 2019, but things really got going when End Violence made us a major grant in 2020. That grant enabled us to complete ASAILO and launch it in South Africa and Zambia, while accelerating the development of features designed to deal with online child sexual exploitation and abuse, as well as child sexual abuse material, CSAM. We've since launched in Ethiopia and Malawi and expect to be in 6 countries by the end of this year. There's a big opportunity to take the well-known brands of the child helplines with numbers like 116 and 1098 and bring them from the telephone era into the social media era. We want to make sure that when a child reaches out on the platforms where they're communicating, like Facebook, WhatsApp, or Instagram, that there's a helpline on the other end of that text. We've also found that people are often reluctant to report online issues in CSAM to government-run portals, but they do trust the helplines. But we think that by strengthening the helplines and their ability to deal with online challenges faced by children, we're going to greatly strengthen society's response to those online challenges. We have very ambitious goals for helping the helpline movement. We want to triple the effectiveness of a frontline counselor, helping them help 3 times as many children while helping them better. And that really gets the attention of a national helpline director whose job it is to do far more with the same or less money. Now, thanks to the digital asset, the digital public asset that End Violence has helped create, one where the data belongs to the helplines, we've already been funded to launch in 8 countries. End Violence has helped us spread the word about ASAILO, meet the crucial partners working globally on fighting the online abuse of children, and navigate some challenging conversations with some of the tech industry's biggest players. We're already talking to wealthy country helplines about possibly adopting ASAILO, and of course, they can afford to pay their own way, which will do a huge amount for our sustainability model. Now, thanks to End Violence and a group of tech-connected donors, we think we've made a great start on a 15 or 20-year commitment to improve the technology of ASAILO every single year while greatly strengthening the helpline movement's ability to meet the needs of children. By significantly increasing helpline capacity, we believe that we can convince them to fully take on the online challenges facing by children. And we can help them improve their program delivery, collect far better data, unlock better advocacy, and increase the use of evidence-based practices, all for the benefit of children. Thank you very much.
These 2 examples of recent progress by Minister McLean and Jim demonstrate just how important high-level political leadership and emerging technology are in preventing and responding to violence and abuse against children. The End Violence Partnership looks forward to continuing our ongoing collaboration with the UK government and Tech Matters. We're now going to hear from child activists and leaders from Uganda, Kenya, Yemen, and India, who will each share their perspectives and talk about the critical role that children's networks play in advocating for an end to violence against children.
Hi everyone, my name is Bharti Mepani and I'm joined today by a panelist of youth advocates. I'm going to hand over to each of them to introduce themselves. So Ikran, please start us off.
Hello everyone, my name is Ikran from Kenya.
Hi everyone, I am Lucky from Uganda.
أهلا بالجميع أنا ياسمين مريم.
Hello everyone, I'm Sonia from India.
Welcome, Sonia, Ikran, Yasmin and Lucky. So Ikran, I'm going to start with you with the first question. And I understand you are a Girl Ambassador and a member of the Global Network of Religions for Children's Committee. You have been instrumental in raising awareness on issues related to violence against girls. Could you tell us a little bit more about your involvement? Thank you.
Thank you, Bharti. So I would like to talk about what happened in my community during the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of children, young children and girls have been at a greater risk. Their health have been at risk, their education have been at risk, their dreams have been buried. One of the effects on children was hunger, because they used to rely for food from schools, and since schools were closed during the pandemic, they did not get access to food, thus leading to hunger problems. And another problem was young girls have been married off just to provide food for their families. Young girls, their dreams have been buried and their education have been forgotten, just to provide food for their parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ikran. And Lucky, I hear you are a passionate advocate for children. Can you describe one or two examples of how you and your peers have been tackling violence against children?
Thank you so much. Me and my peers came up in my community to help end child labor, where you could find very young children at the age of 13 working. We engaged with local council officials, chasing them away from the streets. Another engagement we had, we mobilized different youth that were engaging in unhealthy activities. We had sessions with them, counseling sessions, and we shared with them the disadvantages of the things they were doing.
And Lucky, what actions can be taken to address traditions that harm children?
Traditions that the actions that can be taken to end traditions that harm children, majorly to end female genital mutilation, which has harmed very many girls in our societies. Strict laws should be put against such activities so that they can persecute all the people who are involving in those unhealthy activities. Also, to end child marriages, they should engage in putting strict laws to arrest such people.
Thank you, Lucky. Yasmin, as First Deputy of the Yemen's Children's Parliament and a member of the Manara Network, what is your ask of leaders?
نحن نريد منكم إيقاف الحرب على الأطفال. نحن نريد منكم تغيير الوضع وصنع السلام. نريد منكم اشراكنا وألا تنسونا، لأن لدينا الخبرة ونعرف كيف هو الشعور بالتعرض للعنف. نحن نعرف في مجتمعاتنا أفضل من أي شخص آخر. نطالب منكم حمايتنا من العنف، خاصة الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة، فهم الأكثر ضعفاً في المجتمع.
Thank you, Yasmin. And Sonia, what are some of the issues the strong network of youth you are involved in has been tackling?
Well, we have a strong youth network comprising 14,000 youths, and we are actually tackling such a problem about child marriage and provide education especially to the girl child. Actually, I have a bitter experience of child marriage that I can remember the 2 days we have lost two fellow sisters of us. One of them has committed suicide, and other one, the 15 years old girl, was brutally tortured by her in-laws house with her husband, who was 38 years old, and after 1 year she got killed. And there is numerous cases of child marriage in my district, and especially in my working areas, and we can see they are forced to work laboriously just because they are from a poor background, and they are normally deprived from the basic rights of development and education and etc. So that's why we are working with our group to give them the shelter, and we do campaigning, taking out of the rally, and also we discuss how to take actions against these issues, because the girls are depriving from so many things before the starting of their life. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Ikran, during the preparation for this session, you mentioned a couple of things. One was around female genital mutilation, and the other around the higher risks that children face as a result of COVID-19. Could you say a little bit more of both of these issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Bharti. So some of the challenges that children have faced during the pandemic is that they have been forced to stay at home due to the closure of schools, and this has led to increase in violence against children. They have been forced to stay at home, so they cannot get access to the food that they used to get in schools, and they also perhaps some children face violence from their homes. So these acts have been perpetuated during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ikran. And Yasmin, why should children and youth be recognized as key partners in the global partnership to end violence against children?
أولاً لأننا الضحايا، كذلك نحن الأقرب إلى الضحايا الآخرين، نحن نعرف أكثر من أي شخص عن التعرض للعنف. الحلول التي نقدمها تعتبر استناداً إلى الواقع الذي نحن نعيشه وإلى حياتنا الواقعية التي نحن نمر فيها.
Thank you, Yasmin. And Lucky, what is the biggest action you think we can all take, so world leaders, communities and children, to tackle violence against children?
I think the best action world leaders can take to end violence against children is to persecute all those people that are engaging in violating children so as to protect children and safeguard their rights.
Thank you, Lucky. And Sonia, you've often mentioned about the importance of having courage and an endless fighting spirit when it comes to solutions or to tackling violence against children. Could you say a little bit more about what you meant by this?
I think in this world, there is hardly anything happens without courage, and bringing revolution always it's not so easy. It requires massive courage because we are doing this works which happens with the name of culture, and I think with the immense courage and togetherness, we will think about to doing this kind of work, which will be spread out to the globe beautifully to stop violence against children. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as we come towards the end of our session, I'd like to give you a few moments to share any final remarks that you may have that you would like to share with everyone that's joining us today. So, Ikran, would you like to lead us into your final remarks? Thank you.
Thank you, Bharti. I would like to urge global leaders to bring an end to female genital mutilation. I would like to urge them to support young girls in communities to bring an end to female genital mutilation. I would like them to promote education for young children, to support education and mainly children who live in poverty-stricken places where they do not have access to quality education. I would like global leaders to look into that and to support young children across the world. Thank you.
As we end the session, I would also like to call upon world leaders to protect children's rights. And as we end, let it not end with us who have been on the call. Let us go and engage our fellow children and enlighten them about more of our rights so that we can protect and safeguard our future, because we children are tomorrow's generation.
هناك الكثير ممن يعتقدون أن الاجتماعات لا يمكن أن تغير أي شيء. دعونا نثبت خطأهم، دعونا نتحرك معا وننطلق من هذا الاجتماع لنصنع تغييرا مهما للأطفال. أن يعمل القادة جميعا لوقف الحرب على الأطفال، فهي تضر بنا وبمجتمعنا وبأجيالنا. يجب علينا حماية الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة لأنهم الأكثر ضعفا في مجتمعي كما ذكرت سابقا. في يوم من الأيام سوف نصل إلى أحلامنا. أخيرا، أوقف الحرب على الأطفال. دافعوا عن حقوقنا. شكرا جزيلا.
Let's end the child marriage. Let's educate the girl, and also we must sensitize the community, educate the community about the damage effect of child marriage. For this, I'd like to tell all of you, let's work together, let's look after to each other, let's stand against the violence against children. I prefer one day we will have the war without the word about violence against children. That word should not be stay longer, should not be say that so much necessary to us, and we will have a beautiful world with world without the word violence against children. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ikran, Lucky, Yasmin, and Sonia, for everything you are doing to end violence against children. Thank you for sharing your insights and your expertise, and your asks and your call for action to leaders and children and communities all over the world as we work together to find solutions to end violence against children. Thank you. Please join with me to thank our youth advocates and panelists.
Thank you so much, Ikran, Lucky, Yasmin, and Sonia. That was a really powerful discussion. Another reminder of the central role that children can and must play in ending violence against children, from the local through to the global level, by raising awareness, informing policy, and mobilizing action from children and other critical stakeholders. We really must continue to draw upon children's energy and ideas and stand alongside them to help solve the issues that affect their lives and their futures. Thank you. We now head to Phnom Penh for remarks by His Excellency Vuan Sot, the Minister of Social Affairs, Veterans and Youth Rehabilitation in the Royal Government of Cambodia. And he will outline progress being made to end all forms of violence against children in Cambodia. Then we will hear from our second End Violence champion, Dr. Tush Wik Ramananka, who will speak about how her daughter experienced corporal punishment and mental abuse in the classroom in Sri Lanka, as well as ongoing efforts to shift social norms and the system that perpetuates this type of violence. And then this segment of today's event will conclude with remarks by Julie Morgan, the Deputy Minister for Social Services in the Welsh Government, who will share Wales' new law prohibiting corporal punishment and why an innovative communications campaign is so important for the effective implementation of that law.
ការពារកុមារនិងយុវវ័យពីអំពើហិង្សាគឺការចាំបាច់សម្រាប់សុខុមាលភាពនិងការអភិវឌ្ឍពេញមួយជីវិតរបស់ពួកគេយើងមានភស្តុតាងនិងឧបករណ៍ដើម្បីទប់ស្កាត់អំពើហិង្សាលើកុមារសម្រាប់កម្ពុជាយើងបាននិងកំពុងចាត់វិធានការដើម្បីបញ្ចប់អំពើហិង្សាលើកុមារដែលមានកិច្ចសហការពហុវិស័យនៅក្នុងការអនុវត្តសកម្មភាពដើម្បីទប់ស្កាត់និងឆ្លើយតបចំពោះអំពើហិង្សាលើកុមារយើងបានរៀបចំកិច្ចពិភាក្សាគោលនយោបាយថ្នាក់ជាតិស្ដីពីដំណោះស្រាយដើម្បីបញ្ចប់អំពើហិង្សាលើកុមារនៅថ្ងៃ19ខែតុលាឆ្នាំ2021ដែលមានការចូលរួមពីក្រសួងស្ថាប័នសំខាន់ៗដែលពាក់ព័ន្ធនៅក្នុងការអនុវត្តផែនការសកម្មភាពនេះព្រមទាំងភ្នាក់ងារសហប្រជាជាតិដៃគូអភិវឌ្ឍវិស័យឯកជនហើយសំខាន់បំផុតមានវត្តមានយុវវ័យនិងយុវជនដើម្បីបង្ហាញពីសមិទ្ធផលនានាបញ្ហាប្រឈមនិងវិធានការបន្តដើម្បីឆ្ពោះទៅរកការបញ្ចប់អំពើហិង្សាលើកុមារនៅកម្ពុជារាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាបានបង្កើនកិច្ចខិតខំប្រឹងប្រែងរបស់ខ្លួនតាមរយៈការដាក់ចេញនៅច្បាប់គោលនយោបាយនិងក្របខ័ណ្ឌគតិយុត្តដើម្បីដោះស្រាយគ្រប់ទម្រង់នៃអំពើហិង្សាលើកុមារដូចជាគោលនយោបាយជាតិស្ដីពីប្រព័ន្ធកិច្ចការពារកុមារឆ្នាំ2019-2029ស្របពេល ដែលច្បាប់ស្តីពីកិច្ចការពារកុមារកំពុងស្ថិតនៅក្នុងដំណើរការនៃការរៀបចំយើងនឹងបន្តធ្វើការងារដើម្បីធានានៅការអនុវត្តគោលនយោបាយនិងច្បាប់ទាំងនេះប្រកបដោយប្រសិទ្ធភាពដើម្បីពង្រឹងគុណភាពនិងការមានទិន្នន័យពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងអំពើហិង្សាលើកុមារប្រព័ន្ធ CPIMS ត្រូវបានដាក់ឲ្យអនុវត្តនៅខែមិថុនាឆ្នាំ2021ជាមួយនឹង dashboard ដែលអាចប្រើប្រាស់បានជាសាធារណៈបន្ថែមលើនេះសំណួរពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងការដាក់វិន័យកុមារត្រូវបានដាក់បញ្ចូលទៅក្នុងការអង្កេតវិទ្យាសាស្ត្រនិងសុខភាពដែលនឹងត្រូវអនុវត្តនៅឆ្នាំ2022វិធានការទាំងនេះនឹងផ្ដល់ទិន្នន័យបច្ចុប្បន្នភាពអំពីអំពើហិង្សាលើកុមារនៅកម្ពុជាដើម្បីបញ្ជាក់ថាតើមានវឌ្ឍនភាពដែរឬទេនិងដើម្បីផ្ដល់ជាភស្តុតាងសម្រាប់ការរៀបចំកម្មវិធីនៅពេលអនាគតកក្កដាឆ្នាំ2021ផែនការសកម្មភាពរយៈពេល5ឆ្នាំដើម្បីទប់ស្កាត់និងឆ្លើយតបចំពោះការកេងប្រវ័ញ្ចផ្លូវភេទកុមារតាមប្រព័ន្ធអនឡាញត្រូវបានដាក់ឲ្យអនុវត្តក្រសួងអប់រំយុវជននិងកីឡាកំពុងអនុវត្តមគ្គុទ្ទេសក៍ប្រតិបត្តិស្តីពីកិច្ចការពារកុមារនៅសាលារៀនហើយការបណ្ដុះបណ្ដាលអំពីវិន័យវិជ្ជមានត្រូវបានដាក់បញ្ចូលប្រកបដោយជោគជ័យទៅក្នុងប្រព័ន្ធអប់រំរបស់រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាល
In the words of my favorite humanitarian, Nelson Mandela, there is no greater revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. Sri Lanka, once known as the Pearl of the Indian Ocean, is where I experienced violence of a brutal terrorist war for 30 years, both as a child growing up and as an adult physician healing those child soldiers forced into terrorism and violence. The island paradise is now officially at peace for the past decade. Yet, within the last 14 months, 7 children have been physically and sexually abused and murdered. Not a single person of authority has flinched to protect our children. Whilst having the honor of being the only country in South Asia committed to Sustainable Developmental Goal 16.2 to end violence against children, 30 years after ratifying the UNCRC, child protection is a national crisis in my paradise. I dedicate these 7 minutes to those 7 lives snatched and 4.2 million children at risk in Sri Lanka. This is a call out to you, yes, you, my friends, and the leaders of the world, to rally stronger and bolder. Like all activists, I too turned adversity to advocacy when my own 11-year-old daughter was subjected to corporal punishment and mental abuse in an international school in Sri Lanka. The image of my vivacious, beautiful girl, curled up in a fetal position, is one that I will carry to my grave, which no parent would have to suffer. Over the years, my daughter came home with stories of being forced to kneel down, knock on the head, pulling of the ears. I was shocked and concerned. I complained to the school authorities that this form of abuse was not simply outdated, but unacceptable. I was particularly concerned about the girls having to kneel in front of the male teachers, endorsing an archaic mentality that women needed to be submissive. I appealed to the school board for a transparent complaints mechanism, safeguarding policy, and child psychology training for all staff, but nothing changed. Instead, they bullied my child, harassing her and urging her to leave the school and harassing us on social media. As she fell deeper into mental despair, she stopped going to school, her grades plummeted, and she refused to participate in tennis as a top 10 national ranked tennis player. That was the spark that led me to work more urgently and passionately to end corporal punishment, but little did I realize that this was an endemic issue in most schools. We have a proverb, a curry that is not stirred and a child that is not beaten are both spoiled. It is engraved into our culture, often impossible to confront. None of the international schools are regularized by the Ministry of Education, leaving thousands of children vulnerable and unguarded by the state, contrary to the constitutional rights. Another fun fact I was not familiar with. No one was willing to take responsibility for the abuse happening within my daughter's school. Every single one of those systems was failing my child, who was formally diagnosed with severe mental abuse on 3 separate occasions. The education system, child protection, law enforcement, human rights, and the judiciary. When I took my daughter's case to the Supreme Court, I was confronted with an eruption of laughter. I realized they were failing other children too. As we speak right now, there are over 20,000 cases backlogged at the Attorney General's Department as far as 10 years, and my child is now just a number. When the Supreme Court refused to grant leave to proceed, we filed a petition at the UN Human Rights Committee, registered as the world's first case of an 11-year-old against corporal punishment. The state party has responded in March of this year. Although delayed by COVID, we are confident that the final deliberation, which is a public document, will have huge implications to end this heinous crime globally. In our quest to end corporal punishment, we established the Stop Child Cruelty Trust, a charitable organization, with children and the youth, the true beneficiaries of the future, directly involved in our campaigns. Our intensive advocacy work and indefatigable efforts to raise awareness has elevated corporal punishment to a daily topic of conversation, where the pendulum has swung in favor of eliminating this archaic practice. We have been appointed as the only civil society organization by the Ministry of Justice to a committee on juvenile law reforms. We have established Sri Lanka's first ever child protection alliance with 20 credible NGOs to strengthen our voice in advocacy. Although much more needs to be done, I am energized by the changes achieved at the highest level. In February this year, the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka gave a historic decision denouncing corporal punishment and referencing UNCRC directly for the first time. We are now campaigning vigorously to get those directives implemented via Parliament. My friends, change is coming, slowly but surely. It requires a triangular, well-balanced effort, society's willingness to change attitudes, and effective law enforcement and visionary leadership. I appeal to the governments of the world, the leaders who are listening today, to end the rhetoric and work cohesively, holding each government responsible and accountable to end corporal punishment.
Bore da, good morning. I'm Julie Morgan, a member of the Welsh Senedd and Deputy Minister for Social Services in the Welsh Government. I'm so pleased to be contributing to the Global Forum for Children and Youth. I'm very proud we are making physical punishment illegal through our landmark legislation, which comes into force on the 21st of March 2022. I've always believed that children should have the same protection from assault as adults. There can be no justification for a big person to hit a little person. If we want to protect children's rights, we need to make all physical punishment illegal. I'm delighted to talk to you about our Ending Physical Punishment campaign. Guided by the evidence, we understood that for the incidence of physical punishment to reduce over time, we needed a three-pronged approach: a change in the law, awareness raising, and ongoing support for parents. Ultimately, communications must be engaging if you want people to listen to and understand your message. and it's important to shape, develop and refine that message by listening. This includes listening to our citizens, social listening, listening to communities which aren't always heard, and listening to experts. By doing this, we find out what they want to know, what their concerns are, and how they want to receive the message. Listening is key to delivering an effective campaign. This is of paramount importance when communicating a change in the law, and in our case, a change in criminal law. People have a right to know what actions are illegal so that they don't break the law. By listening, we understood our awareness-raising campaign needed to be clear and unambiguous. We needed clear messages. We are ending physical punishment in Wales. The law in Wales is changing. Physical punishment will be illegal. Whilst the campaign would signpost support for parents, its main purpose was to communicate these key messages. From the outset, we were committed to two key principles. Firstly, engagement would underpin every phase of communications. We wanted to take people with us on the journey and ensure our stakeholders were briefed and had the information they needed prior to the law change. Secondly, that it would be an inclusive campaign. We wanted to engage with communities where there may be barriers to communication and who are often overlooked as a consequence. So we developed a multi-phased integrated engagement and communication strategy based on these principles. We've been very clear, consistent and unapologetic in conveying our rationale for introducing the legislation. This is a matter of protecting children's rights, a question of principle. We were not swayed off course by counter-arguments, many of which would not be justified if we were talking about the assault of adults. This clear messaging runs through all our resources, an example of which is our TV ad. I hope that the change in the law in Wales, alongside all the other countries where this has happened, will provide the impetus for legislation to follow in other countries. This is the sound of change.
This is the sound of change. From the 21st of March 2022, the law in Wales will change to protect us and our rights. No one will be allowed to use any kind of physical punishment, like smacking, to discipline us.
It's so encouraging to hear about that tangible change taking place in Cambodia, Sri Lanka and Wales. It's so important that we have examples of progress which both inspire but also inform and help others to take action. Thank you. Now we turn to Liza Soberano, a Filipino actress who is speaking out about children's right to protection from violence. And she's doing so to raise awareness and to encourage everyone, especially children and women who experience or witness violence, to speak up and report it.
As a woman, as a Filipino artist, and as a Save the Children Philippines ambassador, I believe that women and influencers alike should start speaking up about their rights, particularly their rights to be protected from all forms of violence. The National Baseline Study on Violence Against Children states that 3 in 5 Filipino children experience physical violence at home, while 1 in 2 Filipino children experience online abuse. This is an alarming rate of violence committed against children and violating their rights to being protected. I think that women and influencers alike should start speaking up against violence, because not only can they contribute to awareness about these issues, but also encouragement and confidence in our fellow women and children. It is not their fault when they experience violence, because violence will never be acceptable. It is important for them to understand that they can and should speak up, report, and get the help that they need. I appeal to every adult, especially to parents and caregivers, to make sure that the home is where the child feels the safest, and that family members are the people they can trust most to protect and care for them. It is never justifiable to instill fear in children either by using physical or humiliating punishments. Telling them that any form of harm used against them is a form of love or discipline is wrong. Let us be responsible online users. thinking twice before we post photos or share information that may fall into the wrong hands. Being responsible online is not just about protecting ourselves, but it is also about knowing that we should not bully others online. Children must be empowered to protect themselves and to speak up when they feel harmed or violated by teaching and guiding them and making sure that they have access to safe reporting mechanisms and the best support possible. Most importantly, I call on the government to make sure that child protection mechanisms are in place, accessible, and functional at all times, to pass and implement laws that strengthen the protection of children, to help families better support their children's protection, and to seriously listen to children's voices, considering their recommendations in making laws, policies, and programs, and urgently acting upon cases of violence against children. Only through a concerted effort can every child be assured of their right to protection from violence. I, Liza Sobrano, a woman, actress, influencer, and Save the Children ambassador, signify my commitment to end violence, and hopefully through my actions and statements, I can contribute to saving children from all forms of violence at all times. Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you with us today, Lisa. The role that artists and influencers play when they decide to champion a cause really can't be overestimated. To reach new audiences with your message and to help raise awareness of issues such as ending violence against children so that they're better understood and more widely discussed among the public. Thank you. Our next speaker is Aisha Haman, an end violence champion from Nigeria, who will share her story from facing child marriage to becoming a legal champion for girls experiencing violence.
I would like to start with a quote by Roy T. Burnett that says, "Don't be pushed around by the fears in your mind. Be led by the dreams in your heart." This has always been a guide for me as a child, as someone that faced the issue of child marriage growing up. Child marriage, like we know, is a form of sexual and gender-based violence, and it poses a lot of threats to the life of every girl child that is subjected to child marriage. The issue of obstetric fistula, cancer, among other things. Now, like most of the world, in northern Nigeria, the norm, especially in rural communities, is that a girl should get married at the experience of her first menstrual cycle. And like every other girl, I lost my father at the age of 5, and I had to go live with my uncles. And then at some point when I was 17, the issue of getting married came up, regardless of whether I was in school or not. And I'm very grateful that I have a mother who stood by me, because she was also a child bride herself. She got married to my father when she was 17, and she never had the opportunity to complete her education until later on. Now, my mother stood by me, defying all the odds, and ensuring that I have the education and I reach my fullest potential. And that was exactly what happened. We had to leave, move to another city, where she supported me through everything, and she put me through school until I became a lawyer. First with the Ministry of Justice in Nigeria, where I worked as a public defense lawyer, and we were fighting for victims of rape, victims of human rights abuse, among other things. My career ended with the Ministry of Justice when I realized that even though we could help people, a lot of people, especially victims of SGBV, child marriage, rape, among other things, could not come forward to speak up for the fear of stigmatization. Now, I thought there was more that I could do. So we founded Lift Africa Foundation in 2018 in the hope that we could help more people. And our pilot project was named From Streets to Classrooms, where we encouraged more people to go to school, especially girls that were engaged in street hawking, among other things. We also try to create awareness on the importance of getting an education instead of getting married at a very young age. It is not always easy to do what we're doing. It is not always straight. you face a lot of challenges. And I could remember the first time in 2018, after I founded Lift Africa Foundation, we went to a community to create awareness on the importance of sending girls to school. And we were quite literally chased out of the village in Adamawa State. There were young men, and they almost beat us up, I and my team. So the community did not like what we were saying. They thought it was against their norm, as usual, to send girls to school. So they thought we were coming to pollute their communities. So we finally just had to connect with one of the royal fathers in that community, and he spoke to those people, and they allowed us. And I'm happy to say that that community has about 200 people that have been sent to school through our programs. So because of that, we began getting audience from many other communities, because the person that we spoke to had a lot of prestige, and it really helped us. So I would not want to say too much, but the first thing I want us to understand is that it is very important for us to work towards ending sexual violence against children and child marriage for good. And what I think the first thing we need to do is to create a culture where victims of rape are supported, survivors of rape are supported, and we also have to understand that 1 in 4 girls, the statistics is there, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 10 boys experience sexual violence before they are 18 years old. And most of the time, so many of those people that experience violence never tell anyone about it. The main reason being the fear of stigmatization, retaliation, shame, and among other vices. So we need to create societies where people who experience sexual violence can come forward safely. We also have to talk to children about consent, because it's very important. We have to teach them to know the difference between appropriate and inappropriate touching. We also have to make them understand that they should speak up, even if it involves someone that is family. We need to engage men and boys, because they have a key role to play in ending child violence against children, sexual violence, and whatever form of violence, because women alone cannot transform our societies. Women alone cannot do it. And so we have to involve more people. We have to raise our voice properly. We have to teach the communities to understand that speaking up refusing to speak up is not the problem. The duty of protecting children lies in the hands of every single person. And this is what we are going to continue to do for as long as we live.
Aisha's personal story highlights the life-changing role that parents and a quality education can play to ensure that children reach their full potential, and the importance of local leaders in helping to shift harmful social norms and create the space for change. It's now my privilege to welcome 15-year-old Tiago from Brazil to speak on behalf of children's networks around the world and present a children's manifesto, a call to action for the international community to do more and act with greater urgency to end all forms of violence against children.
Olá, meu nome é Tiago Alexandre, tenho 15 anos e moro no Brasil. Antes de tudo, gostaríamos de expressar a nossa gratidão pelo convite para participar da conferência da Unicef. É muito importante para nós termos espaços que possamos nos escutar e garantir o nosso direito de participação. Na comunidade onde eu moro, eu faço trabalho de busca de crianças e adolescentes que estão fora da escola. Vou às suas casas, pergunto se estão bem e o que precisam para retornar. Minha primeira fala nesse conselho é: os governos precisam trabalhar para garantir escolas seguras e inclusivas para todas as crianças, especialmente aquelas da periferia. Como meus amigos do Quênia, Iêmen, Uganda e Índia compartilharam antes, crianças e adolescentes de muitos países no mundo sofreram violência. Precisamos acabar com todas as formas de violência, do casamento infantil ao trabalho infantil, do bullying ao abuso sexual, da violência física à emocional. Também exigimos que os governos trabalhem para banir todas as formas de violência contra a criança, mas tudo sem desculpas. Permitam que pais responsáveis mantenham as crianças seguras e livres de violência. Tornem a internet segura para as crianças e evitem o abuso online, pois na internet as crianças estão se tornando cada vez mais vulneráveis à exploração e ao abuso, já que as pessoas podem acessar a internet de forma anônima. Crianças e adolescentes precisam de incentivo nas áreas da educação, segurança, saúde e lazer. Estamos aqui para oferecer a nossa energia, ideias e experiência. E por isso estamos reivindicando os nossos direitos constituídos nas leis. Não podemos permitir mais violações. Nós queremos apoio. Precisamos de ação agora. Muito obrigado.
That was so powerful. On behalf of the end violence community, thank you, Tiago, and the countless children and young people around the world for your leadership and your determination to protecting children everywhere from violence and abuse. The Children's Manifesto comes at a really important moment for children everywhere because while we're making progress in so many countries and communities, that change is simply not taking place fast enough. So now is the time for the international community to respond. And as the world navigates through the pandemic phase of COVID-19, we must do more to stand with and for children and to catalyze transformative change by strengthening child protection systems, investing in policies and evidence-based programs so needed to make sure that every child grows up in a safe, a secure, and a nurturing environment. We are now joined by international experts and leaders who I know will both inspire and challenge us as we focus on charting the way forward, placing a spotlight on what's working, identifying key obstacles that must be addressed, and highlighting major upcoming opportunities to accelerate progress. Our next speaker is Dr. Daniela Ligiero, the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Together for Girls. And Daniela will speak to us today about the emerging movement of survivors and allies to end sexual violence against children and adolescents. Daniela, why is this movement of incredibly powerful advocates rising now? And what is the movement calling for?
Howard, thank you so much for having me here today. You know, I come at this from two angles. First, as a professional who's worked in this field for over 20 years, we know that data and evidence and technical expertise are all necessary but not sufficient to drive change. And we know that we need powerful advocacy to put political pressure on decision makers and leaders to truly create the kind of seismic change that we need. And second, as a survivor of child sexual abuse myself, and as someone who's been meeting other amazing survivor leaders for over a decade, I've known deep in my bones that survivors can be incredibly powerful advocates. But we've also learned that survivors can't act alone and often feel alone. So we need allies like organizations, parents, experts, and institutions to come together with survivors to demand that change. And right now, we are so excited because we have a generous $10 million grant that we just received from the Oak Foundation, and we're working hard to do just that, to start to catalyze a powerful advocacy movement of survivors and allies. It's been a long time coming to end all forms of sexual violence against children and adolescents in a generation, and we're just getting started. We'll have a lot more to say in the coming months. But as a first step to help guide the vision of our movement, we've gathered a group of 15 survivor leaders from every region of the world, representing multiple types of sexual violence against children and adolescents. And we're working now to create an increasing number of leaders that can be engaged in this movement. And, you know, I've been really struck that as survivors, we each have our own stories, and all of the details might be different, but we share a common pain, a common shame, and a common struggle. But we're also united in a common vision, a common hope, and a common dream, and that together we are powerful. You asked us what we want. We want bold and transformative action from leaders to change policies and implement programs that can be taken to scale and fully funded. We need to elevate our ambition. We want prevention to protect this and every generation to come. We want healing for victims, survivors, and their families. And we want justice for wrongdoers, the complicit, and for the victimized. And so we're really excited to work with all of you as we begin to really catalyze this movement and call for these ambitious changes that are needed in our field. Thank you so much, Howard.
Daniela, we really appreciate your and your fellow survivors' leadership on this. And I think that powerful, clear, compelling calling for prevention, healing, and justice. And that from the voices of survivors is just so powerful. It's my pleasure to now introduce Inga Ashing, the Chief Executive Officer of Save the Children International, who will also be speaking today on behalf of the Civil Society Forum to End Violence Against Children. Earlier this year, the Together to End Violence campaign released a leader's statement alongside 6 game-changing policy proposals to the end violence community to enable the community to advocate with one voice. Why is this so important, and what role is civil society playing to advocate for the adoption and the implementation of the policy proposals?
Thank you for that question, Howard. The Civil Society Forum is committed to act as one to champion progress in countries, organizations, networks, and communities. We know that we cannot end violence against children without the influence and engagement of civil society and children themselves. They play a key role in driving change at all levels. Save the Children and other civil society forum members are advocating for children and youth to be active and engaged agents of change in the global partnership through a collective effort made possible by our partners. The forum also has a key role in sharing good practices and progress. The 6 new policy proposals to end violence against children provide us with a clear call to action that can further guide and focus our advocacy and programming efforts to end violence against children.
Fantastic. And it's so powerful to have it called out, the criticality of civil society, but also the criticality of the inclusion, the involvement of children in their voice, but also in the design and the implementation of programs which affect them. Can you share some examples, Inga, and any key learnings from the Civil Society Forum's collective efforts to ensure that children are safe from all forms of violence?
I'm happy to, and the Civil Society Forum is a crucial platform for coordinating efforts and technical expertise to tackle violence against children. For example, to achieve the SDG targets and ultimately children's rights to a life free from violence, we continue to advocate for and invest in effective child protection, promoting solutions to eradicate violence and abuse experienced by too many girls and boys. We have drawn attention to the importance of safety online and to the mental health and learning crisis experienced by children as a result of prolonged school closures due to the pandemic. Organizations provide the Safe to Learning initiatives with technical expertise, advocacy approaches, and inputs to evidence collection and impact evaluation. We call for children's return to school in the best possible solutions and conditions, and we ensure children's well-being and learning outcomes reaching the most vulnerable. At the national level, civil society organizations have shared inspiring good practice and progress, including in Cambodia, Nepal, Benin, Romania, and Uganda, in Solutions Summit events throughout the year. We also support the courageous health, education, child protection, and humanitarian professionals working alongside faith leaders, community volunteers, parents, and young people to keep children safe. With these partners, we push to close legal gaps that leave children vulnerable to corporal and emotional punishment at home and in schools, or early and forced child marriage. We want to see government's commitments acted upon and followed by adequate investments. It is now critical that we, as a community, commit to fight violence against children, put children's protection at the centre of plans to build forward better and safer.
Thank you. Those were really powerful examples, Inga, both of the civil society's global work, but also that criticality again of the role of children, the voice of children coming through the work. From Gaborone, Botswana, I'm delighted to welcome Joy Pumathi, the board chair of the End Violence Partnership. Joy, in your role as Executive Secretary of the African Leaders Malaria Alliance, that places you in regular contact with heads of government and other senior leaders. What excites you right now about the moment that we're in? What will it take for us to get the issue of ending violence against children to be higher on the political agenda? And what are some of the key levers that you see at national level that we must consider to deliver sustainable change for children?
You know, all of us have to agree that children are the most important asset, not just to families, but to communities, to societies. And when we talk about the economic growth of a country, we are talking about its human capital, which is the extent to which we have managed to develop our children to become balanced members of the community. It has been inspiring to hear from children and young people and the end violence champions, government ministers, civil society, partners on recent progress and momentum. But we have to appreciate that we have an opportunity here to ensure that ending violence against children is put highest on the political agenda to drive the action and investment that is required at national level. Now, what it will take is leadership. But leadership is not just about the political leadership. It is about the leadership in the family, the leadership in the community, the leadership in the society, amongst the various players, the various stakeholders. We have evidence that Inspire approaches show that 20 to 50% decreases in prevalence has been achieved by well-designed and evaluated programs. This design has to have a multi-stakeholder partnership. It has to have accountability to implement existing commitments. It has to include ambitious policy and funding commitments by all stakeholders, public, private, civil society, and the foundations that normally support us in our development efforts. It is critical to understand that within the national context, it is the national leaders themselves who must be in the driver's seat, whether they are the political, the economic, or the societal, or the cultural leaders. They must develop and foster long-term and trusted relationships with us. And we must develop these relationships as well. Because if there isn't a symbiotic relationship between us and the politicians, the government, civil society, faith community leaders, there is going to be no progress. We must understand that national priorities and processes led by governments, whether it is through the annual budget and planning processes, policy windows, or through evaluation mechanisms or accountability mechanisms that exist at country level, are what is going to guarantee success. We also know that we'll only succeed by working together. So the global partnership, like the End Violence Partnership, plays a critical role in ensuring that we bring all these stakeholders together, bring together diverse capabilities, their expertise, and networks to put children first.
Thank you, Joy. That was so powerful, bringing together those ingredients, not just at the highest level political leadership, but leadership at every level and across multiple sectors that is required, as well as a sense of ambition and the evidence-based strategies. To conclude today's event on a forward-looking note, I'm now going to ask Daniela, Inga, and Joy the same question, which is, we've heard that we're at a critical moment for children everywhere. So what do you each see as the biggest opportunity that we must collectively seize so that every child has the opportunity to grow up safe at home, at school, online, and in their community?
Well, first of all, thank you, Howard, for the leadership of the Global Partnership. This is such a difficult moment on so many levels. But what's exciting to me is I think there is an opportunity to truly elevate our ambition about what is possible. We need to think big, transformative, rebuild, rethink, and really elevate that ambition. And that calls on all of us to truly be brave so that children can be safe. And I'm excited to walk this path with all of you.
Thank you so much, Daniela.
So the pandemic has taught us all that only a strong sense of solidarity and collective responsibility can help us to recover. Today more than ever, diverse actors need to be included and work together. 2022 presents a critical moment for children to be heard, with their critical expertise and influence shaping and defining the solutions to end violence against children. We need to work more together, and we need to put children at the center of everything we do.
Thank you so much. That is clear, it's compelling, and it's actionable. Thanks for joining us today, Inga.
We must not shy away from this seriously acknowledging and addressing the harmful social and cultural norms that perpetuate intergenerational violence. We must place a bright spotlight on the violence that is often hidden in plain sight and break the conspiracy of silence and push for this issue to be at the heart of the public discourse. We must do more to support national governments, fully fund and implement their national policy actions and plans, and end violence against children. Analysis from WHO's Global Status Report shows that only 20% of the countries have national action plans that are fully funded and measurable. This must change, and we must do this in an integrated, holistic way to make sure that children everywhere are safe and that they have a learning environment that will turn them into the effective human capital that they deserve to be and attain self-actualization.
Joy, thank you so much for joining us today and for those very powerful and clear, actionable messages. Thank you. A very big thank you to all of our inspiring speakers and to everyone who has joined us today. Despite the scale and the impact of violence against children, the evidence-based solutions that we know work, and the gains to be had across many development outcomes for individuals, families, communities, and economies, investment to end violence against children remains significantly underfunded. We can and we must address this together so that adequate investment is made to implement national action plans, to make the internet safe for children, to make schools safe, non-violent and inclusive, to end corporal punishment, and to protect children from violence in humanitarian settings. The new End Violence Partnership strategy sets out how we can work together to achieve this and scale our collective impact for children everywhere. We know that violence against children is wrong. We know that it undermines their health, education, and development, and we know what works to stop it. The moral imperative, the economic case for a step change in action is compelling. So let's be bold in our ambition. Let's seize the moment to build a safer world for every child.